The Last Word with Jonathan Capehart in for Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Jen. Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I'm not mad at you. Those were some of the last words Renee Nicole Goode said to an ICE officer before she was shot and killed. We now know those were some of her last words after Vice President J.D. Vance shared new cell phone video of Wednesday's fatal shooting. The public release of the video is part of J.D. Vance's continued defense of ICE officer Jonathan Ross. Here is that disturbing video taken by the ICE officer with one hand and fatally shooting Renee Goode with the other.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you. Show your face. I'm not mad at you. It's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know. It'll be the same plate when you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen. Get in the fucking back. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I said go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Okay.
Out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Oh!
Fucking bitch.
You can hear that the final words on that video are effing B. We don't know who said those words. J.D. Vance posted about that video, quote, "The reality is that his life was endangered and he fired in self-defense." Today, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this.
I understand that Vice President Vance believes that shooting a young mother of 3 in the face 3 times is an acceptable America that he wants to live in, and I do not. And that is a fundamental difference between Vice President Vance and I. I do not believe that the American people should be assassinated in the street.
The video taken from the ICE officer's perspective is also the first time we see Renee Goode moments before she was killed. In a statement to Minnesota Public Radio, Renee Goode's wife, Becca Goode, said, quote, "On Wednesday, January 7th, we stopped to support our neighbors. We had whistles. They had guns." Renee leaves behind 3 extraordinary children. The youngest is just 6 years old and already lost his father. "I am now left to raise our son and to continue teaching him as Renee believed that there are people building a better world for him, that the people who did this had fear and anger in their hearts, and we need to show them a better way." Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison and Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty announced today that they will conduct an independent review into Renee Goode's killing after Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension said Donald Trump's FBI is blocking them from investigating the shooting. Tonight, Chris Hayes spoke with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
The proper thing to do is for the federal authorities to open up their file, to share it with state authorities and state leaders, and that we have a fulsome joint investigation which will lead us to the truth. That's what we're looking for. Don't get me wrong. I'm outraged. I've seen what everybody else has seen.
Here's what Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty told MS Now's Josh Eininger after he sat down with her for an exclusive interview.
When it comes to the administration's, I guess, blocking or the FBI's blocking of this information, what is your opinion of why?
I don't think my opinion matters. I think what really matters here is that we did have an agreement with them, and the BCA had started looking into this, and then suddenly that got taken away. And the ultimate, the whys really don't matter as much as here's the bottom line. Unless the FBI shares that investigation, which includes car forensics and whatever else, we won't have that information to look at. Does that mean we can't make a decision? I don't know. I don't know, but it does, and there's no criticism of the FBI here. That is their process normally. But really, what is the harm here in letting the BCA, our local, our state Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, be there, or at least have access to the evidence that they have so that that can be presented to us.
Leading off our discussion tonight, MS Now senior reporter Josh Eininger. Josh, what have state and local prosecutors' offices told you about how they're trying to keep some control over this investigation?
Well, Jonathan, there are multiple things happening at the same time. First of all, they're continuing to try to get the FBI to relinquish at least enough control to start sharing the information so that the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, can do its investigation. In the state of Minnesota, when any law enforcement officer uses force, that investigation is conducted by this separate independent agency, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And then once they gather all the information, they then present it to the local DA, who then makes a decision on whether or not to prosecute the officer. In this case, it's the county attorney, Mary Moriarty, with whom we sat for that MS Now exclusive earlier today. So she can't really proceed necessarily without all that forensic evidence the FBI has. What they did do today, along with Keith Ellison, the state attorney general, is make an appeal to the public for any witness testimony they might have, or cell phone video, things like that, that would also necessarily add to an investigation. So they're trying to keep that track going because they can control that as they work to try to obtain this forensic information, which they really need.
Right. And Josh, County Attorney Moriarty told you that she continues to hope federal agencies will reverse their decision, right?
Well, absolutely. This is really the question, Jonathan. How do they proceed? You can get the information from people who were witnesses on the scene. You can get cell phone video, maybe even surveillance video. But, if you don't have the forensic information, the trajectory of the bullets, for example, how fast the car was going, a lot of law enforcement experts here in Minnesota have told us today they're concerned that there might not be enough information even to make a decision on whether or not to prosecute. Here's more of what the county attorney told me about that today.
Has there been any conversation at any level with the federal government in the last couple of days from your office saying, why can't the investigators who need to get it, why can't they see it?
I did have initial conversations with the U.S. Attorney's Office, also with the FBI, with whom we have a good relationship. That is where we had that agreement. I truly don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to change that. I continue to hope that they will reverse that decision because why not be transparent about it? I think we would all want that thorough information, the investigation, before we make a decision. I think everybody should want that. I think the officers should want that. The federal government should want that. And certainly we want that.
And again, she was very careful not to characterize the evidence that she's seen in terms of the video, not to characterize her opinion of guilt or innocence on the part of the officer. Her decision is key. Is there enough evidence to proceed and bring a case in this matter? And she's nowhere near that. So all she's saying is she wants the ability to make that decision. And that's really, Jonathan, a big question tonight about whether or not that will happen.
Mm-hmm. And Josh, tell me about your conversation with the Minneapolis Public Safety Commissioner, Todrick Barnett.
So, Jonathan, Todd Barnett is the public safety commissioner in a position between the mayor and all the public safety agencies, including the police department, has had a key role in working on de-escalation techniques in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing in 2020. There's irony here, by the way, in the fact that this is happening in a city that has made such progress in terms of de-escalating police interactions between police and the community. And now this, of course, has been so escalatory over the past several weeks to months. He did say they are working very hard with the community to try to keep the temperature down and try to prevent mass protests like they saw several years ago. Here's what he had to say on that.
How do you keep the temperature low?
I think here in the city, we've done a good job at communicating out, whether it's on our webpage or press release, with communication of, here are your rights as a citizen. We know things are tense with groups now coming into our city to really agitate people. don't take the bait. Please don't take the bait. We really want to continue, one, to be safe for our residents.
City officials pointed out that the worst of the protests after George Floyd were about 3 or 4 days after that killing. Tomorrow will be day 4. So they are hoping to continue to keep the peace in this city as they continue to work to get information and proceed with an investigation here. Jonathan.
MS Now's Josh Eininger in Minneapolis, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Angie Craig of Minnesota. She is the top Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee. She is running for U.S. Senate in 2026. Congresswoman Craig, what is your reaction to the Hennepin County attorney asking the public to send any video or other evidence in Wednesday's fatal shooting directly to her office?
Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's good to be here. I think that's exactly what we need to do. We need the citizens of Minnesota, anyone who might have video evidence. You know, today was a day of unity in Minnesota, where we're here to come together. And the most important thing that we can do is to make sure that we have all of the evidence to state and local authorities so that they can help offset this nastiness and the conclusions that the Trump administration has come to, and J.D. Vance trying to clean all this up before we have any evidence in. So it's really important that the citizens of Minnesota look at everything, all of your Ring cameras. Let's see if we can't help our Attorney General and our local authorities make sure that they have the evidence to get this done.
Congresswoman, this is what Donald Trump had to say today. Watch this.
Do you believe that the FBI should be sharing evidence with state officials in Minnesota?
Well, normally I would, but they're crooked officials.
Congresswoman, your response to the President of the United States.
Well, the President of the United States lost Minnesota in 2016, 2020. He lost it again in 2024, and clearly he cannot get over it. This is political retaliation. It is a political stunt on the part of this administration to be here, to be sending another 1,000 ICE agents to Minnesota. Do they really believe that that's going to make Minnesota more safe? Jonathan, I got off a plane from DC this morning and went straight to a meeting with some city officials and a police chief. And the chiefs here in Minnesota are very concerned that ICE being here, the agitation that they are causing within our communities are making our communities less safe. And we've had a tough 5 years here in Minnesota, as we all know. And we have worked really hard. Our law enforcement officials locally have worked really hard to begin to restore trust with Minnesotans, for our local law enforcement recruits to come back. What this administration is doing is cruel, it's nonsense, and it's not making Minnesota any safer.
On the day of Wednesday's fatal shooting, Congresswoman, as we can see, we're going to roll this B-roll here. You got into a heated exchange with Minnesota Republican Congressman Tom Emmer over his response to the ICE shooting. What can you tell us about what Congressman Emmer told you when you confronted him?
Well, look, you can see from that video that I am very outraged at what Congressman Emmer tweeted about this situation here in Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have 4 Democrats and we have 4 Republicans representing the state in the United States Congress. What I said to Congressman Emmer was this was a political stunt by this administration, and it got a woman killed in Minneapolis today. As you can see from that video, the congressman, he went from 0 to 60. He wouldn't back down. And look, you know, we all need to understand that to unite, we need to know what happened. We need to listen to each other just a little bit more. But quite frankly, what you saw was someone who was very pissed off at Republicans in Congress and at this administration, and outraged on behalf of every Minnesotan and every American at the way that ICE is behaving in our communities.
Congresswoman, Minneapolis public schools canceled classes after Border Patrol agents arrived at a high school and began tackling people, handcuffed 2 staff members, and released pepper spray. What do you say to your colleagues who say that ICE is keeping communities safe?
Well, that's outrageous. It's egregious, the behavior on the part of Trump's ICE. And, you know, what I am going to do is be among a small group of members that will introduce an impeachment resolution against Kristi Noem. ICE Barbie is not doing her job. It's lawless what she's doing in this country. She's not following any of our immigration laws in this country. She's following no protocols with respect to immigration enforcement. And look, you said it a moment ago, I am running for the U.S. Senate to serve. This is not about politics right now. This is about making sure that our communities are safe. One of the most egregious things I've seen today is the video that came out from the ICE agent who took those shots. Who in their right mind in law enforcement is holding a cell phone videoing it while a situation is unfolding? So look, I'm going to reserve saying what I think, but everybody watching this tonight knows what the hell I think. I think that this ICE agency is out of control and that Congress needs to have much more authority over a number of things, including making them wear body cameras, including the training of this agency. This agency is not making America more safe.
Congresswoman Angie Craig, my alma mater Congresswoman, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
Thank you.
Coming up, federal employees with access to federal jobs data are required by law to keep it confidential until official release. Of course, Trump didn't do that, posting takeaways from today's jobs report last night. But the chef's kiss of that is that the numbers are bad. So, spoiler alert, the jobs market was a lot better under Biden. That's next. Donald Trump's first year in office definitely wasn't good for jobs or the job market. New December jobs numbers released today are giving us a glimpse at an anemic U.S. jobs market during Donald Trump's first year back in the White House. The Wall Street Journal reports American employers added jobs at a subdued pace in December, capping a year in which the U.S. labor market lost considerable momentum. Outside of the two most recent recessions, 2025 saw the lowest pace of average monthly job growth since 2003. All told, employers added 584,000 new jobs in 2025, or about 49,000 jobs a month on average. That is a marked deceleration from 2024, when the economy added 2 million jobs at a pace of 168,000 a month. So, under Trump, the economy added, on average, 1/3 of the jobs it did under President Biden. The New York Times adding, the labor market has deteriorated over the past year, in particular for new graduates and others who are looking for work, and people with jobs are hanging on to them tight. The Trump White House quickly went into spin mode. Here is Donald Trump's director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, on Fox, trying to explain away the jobs numbers in truly ridiculous fashion.
When you look at the numbers and see that they're below 100, then the below 100 thing isn't as disturbing as it might be in the past, because a lot of it is like we've reduced federal government employment by 250,000 this year, and of course we're deporting illegals.
While you try to wrap your head around that logic, Hassett followed it up with a separate Fox appearance where he decided to go with a Trump White House favorite: blame the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
You've got revisions now. October down 68,000, November down 8,000. What do you make of that?
Yeah, the numbers, we still have to get the BLS numbers to be more reliable. And there's a lot of work right now. We're recruiting a new head of the BLS.
The Trump White House is, of course, looking for a new head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because Donald Trump fired the last commissioner for releasing jobs numbers he didn't like. And the guy Donald Trump wanted to put in the role was forced to withdraw because it appeared he couldn't get confirmed even in this Trump-friendly Senate. Joining us now, Heather Long, Chief Economist at Navy Federal Credit Union. Heather, great to see you. What do you think the 2025 jobs numbers say about the overall health of the American economy?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for the economy. I would call this a jobless boom. Basically, we're seeing really strong growth in the economy from the AI boom and a lot of spending by the richest consumers in the economy. But at the same time, we're experiencing a hiring recession. As you were flashing up those numbers, it's important to understand weakest hiring outside of an actual recession since 2003 at the end of the dot-com boom. Some other statistics to keep in mind, if it weren't for healthcare and social assistance jobs, we would be talking about layoff in 2025. There are many industries that are doing layoffs. It is not just the federal government. Manufacturing was doing layoffs last year, professional and business services, transport and warehouse sector was doing layoffs. You know, there's quite a few industries. Mining is another one that had a really tough year. And even things like construction and retail basically added 0 jobs. And here's another one to keep in mind. 85% of the jobs that were added in 2025 happened by April. Of course, what happens in April? You have the big tariff announcement.
Right, and you had a data point. Speaking of April, that was even more breathtaking. It was the reverse. There was almost no hiring since April. So, given that, do you think there are any signs that the U.S. labor market rebounds anytime soon?
I think it's going to continue to be this hiring recession for at least a few more months. And this has been really tough. Anyone who's looking for a job is struggling right now. And even people who have jobs, as the New York Times had written, they are clinging to those jobs. You can't just go and get a better job if you're frustrated right now or a higher paying job somewhere else. There just are not many opportunities unless you work in healthcare right now. I will say we'll see what happens later this year. Obviously, there's tax cuts that are going on. The Supreme Court's about to rule on the tariff decisions. That could lower some tariffs going forward. So the Federal Reserve is lowering interest rates. So there are some things that should juice the economy, Jonathan, later this year. So it may be a different situation later in 2026, but it's a rough winter.
Speaking of interest rates, Heather, what do you think the Fed will do with interest rates given the shape that the labor market is in?
It's definitely still a weak labor market. I will say I don't think it's getting worse. It's not getting any better. And certainly a hiring recession is not where you want to be. But it looks like they will be on hold in January and then look to see what the data says the next few months and probably cut in March the next time.
One more question for you, Heather. I think you mentioned that we're all waiting for the Supreme Court's ruling on Trump's tariffs authority. What kind of impact could that decision have on the job market?
I mean, it would be huge for the overall economy if those tariffs are overturned. These are the national emergency tariffs. It's just over half of the tariffs that are currently in place. What it will basically mean is the White House will scramble to put in place some other tariffs. However, many companies will receive refunds, especially small businesses. That's money in their pockets. And more importantly, Jonathan, any tariffs going forward are likely to be a little bit lower. There are some other levers the White House can pull, but they take a lot longer, or they can only go up to about 15%. So the result would probably be slightly lower tariffs. And as you know, in this climate where there's an affordability crunch, any savings is good savings for the middle class.
Always great to have you, Heather Long. Thank you very much for coming back to The Last Word. Coming up, Democrats are betting voters struggling in this economy don't want American taxpayer dollars used to make oil companies or Venezuela great. That's next. Today, Donald Trump pretended to live out his fantasy as an international oil broker after hosting more than a dozen oil executives at the White House this afternoon. After that meeting, Trump said this.
These are the biggest companies in the world sitting around this table. they know the risks. I mean, there are risks. We're going to help them out. We're going to make it real easy. They're going to be there for a long time. We're going to be there together for a long, long time. Venezuela needs money, and we're going to make sure that they get money, and we're going to get money, and the oil companies are going to make something for the work they do, and they're going to get back their money. We're devising a formula, but it won't be so much of a formula. It's going to be what they need. We're going to take care of what they need. There'll be plenty left over. We're going to have a lot of money left over. And the money left over is going to the United States of America, and the oil companies are going to be very happy.
It's like a TV giveaway. You get some money, and you get some money, and don't stop and ask about the details. Because just 3 days ago, Donald Trump told NBC News something very different. And I quote, "A tremendous amount of money will have to be spent, and the oil companies will spend it, and then they'll get reimbursed by us or through revenue." Let's be clear about what the president is saying. Taxpayer dollars could be used to subsidize American oil companies to drill and rebuild oil production in Venezuela. And yet Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, insists the entire operation will cost American taxpayers nothing at all.
U.S. involvement in Venezuela, how much will it cost?
Well, it isn't going to cost us any money. For example, this oil deal that's happening doesn't cost us any money. On the contrary, and if it opens up,
costs no money to the
well,
American taxpayer.
look, I don't have the numbers.
Donald Trump admits it will take a tremendous amount of money, but Marco Rubio says it will cost us nothing. Tonight, the Washington Post reports the oil companies are concerned that the numbers, quote, don't add up. CEO Darren Woods said that Venezuela is, quote, uninvestable after Trump asked him how long it would take the firm to restart operations there. He added that, quote, significant changes have to be made to those commercial frameworks, the legal system, there has to be durable investment protections, and there needs to be a rewrite of the laws governing oil production in Venezuela. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is asking Congress for nearly double the Pentagon budget. And Donald Trump has already said he wants to keep the United States in Venezuela for, quote, a long time. That means long-term costs, long-term risks, and a long-term financial drag on the American people, all while the Republican-led Congress and Republican president refuse to help Americans afford health insurance. How do American taxpayer dollars for Venezuela help American families pay their rent, their mortgage, their grocery bills? Well, I'll tell you, it doesn't. Democrats in Congress don't think so either, and now they want to stop Trump from spending American taxpayer dollars to foreign adventurism and to force Republicans to say where they stand on making Venezuela great again with American money. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi of Illinois. He is a member of the House Oversight and Intelligence Committees. Congressman, today you introduced the No Occupation of Venezuela, or NOVA Act, in the House of Representatives. What exactly would it prevent Trump from doing in Venezuela?
Well, thank you so much. Basically, Joaquin Castro and I introduced this bill to basically make it clear that taxpayer funds should not be used to occupy or, quote unquote, run Venezuela. And your setup piece explained exactly why we need this legislation, because we fear that taxpayer resources are going to be used essentially to subsidize oil companies' exploitation of Venezuelan oil resources. And, when these oil executives came to the White House today and said, it's uninvestable and, it's going to take a lot of money and resources, that is kind of a wake-up call to the rest of us, in the sense that we are the ones, we the taxpayers, will be on the hook for providing those incentives and resources to basically help Trump realize his vision of basically, taking over Venezuelan oil resources. And that's something that my constituents want no part of.
If the Trump administration proceeds with oil subsidies or committing more military personnel to Venezuela, what can Democrats do?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think what we did or what we saw in the Senate with regard to the War Powers Act resolution is very important. It was a bipartisan move, and that really has to do with preventing armed forces, our U.S. armed forces, from being placed in Venezuela, and that's important. Our bill, mine and Joaquin Castro's bill, essentially is talking about taxpayer subsidies to essentially run the country in various regards, whether it's running their healthcare system or running their oil exploitation system. We don't want any part of that. I can tell you, I have not yet met a single person who said, yeah, it's a good idea to go and engage in another Iraq or Afghanistan style occupation of Venezuela instead of focusing on the pressing economic problems at home. Today, I was at a childcare facility where I met a working mom who's about to have her childcare assistance cut off by the Trump administration in an illegal freeze, by the way, which will make it harder for her to work if she doesn't have that assistance. And so she's facing an affordability crisis with regard to childcare, just as others are facing a tremendous affordability crisis with regard to groceries, rent, healthcare, or education. And that is what we need to be focused on right now.
Well, given all those things you just said, what concerns you most about Trump tying U.S. foreign policy to oil production, especially when Americans are struggling with high costs here at home?
Well, look, I think that this smacks of imperialism or colonialism to me, where you basically are trying to, in essence, conquer another country for its natural resources. None of those experiments in history end up well. They're ruinous both for the country that is being exploited or colonized, and it's ruinous for the colonizer. And it always ends in war. And we don't want any part of war. I don't know a single person who wants another endless war or conflict in Venezuela. And this is the policy that Donald Trump, this is the road that Donald Trump is taking us down, whether it's in Venezuela or, for that matter, Greenland or Mexico or Colombia.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois, thank you very much for coming back to The Last Word.
Thank you.
And coming up, Donald Trump says the only thing that can stop him is, quote, my own morality, my own mind. I have a lot to say about that. And so does Bishop William Barber, who will join us next. The New York Times 2-hour-plus interview with President Trump was extraordinary for two alarming reasons. Each reason sits at opposite ends in the piece, like menacing gargoyles over our republic. The first is a breathtaking quote from Trump that opens the interview about whether there were any limits to his global powers.
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop, and that's
law.
very good. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people.
My own morality. By conventional standards, Trump has none. His life is a veritable junkyard of examples, but I'll highlight two of them. In 2017, when white supremacists marched on Charlottesville, Virginia, and Heather Heyer, a counter-protester, was killed by one of them, Trump said this.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
In a fight between bigots and those standing up to their hate, there are no very fine people among the former. Just last month, after the horrific slaying of actor Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, Trump posted a message on his social media platform that was stunning in its cruelty. He wrote that the killing was, quote, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. Given those two examples, Trump's assertion that my own morality will guide his foreign policy decisions seems more like a threat than a balm. The second alarming revelation in the New York Times story came at the very end. Quote, and Mr. Trump, who said he was elected to restore law and order, reiterated that he was willing to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the military inside the United States and federalize some National Guard units if he felt it was important to do so. So far, he said, I haven't really felt the need to do it. Inflammatory statements by Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on the ICE shooting of Renee Good in Minneapolis on January 7th gives me no confidence that Trump won't feel the need to do it in the future. My lack of confidence is compounded by the FBI's decision to block Minnesota officials from investigating the matter with them and the decision to send more Border Patrol agents to Minneapolis. I applaud the righteous indignation expressed by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey against a situation that is making their communities less safe. But I reserve my highest praise for those folks in Minneapolis and elsewhere who have recorded interactions between ICE and their communities. Were it not for an eyewitness recording of Good's final moments, the lies told by Trump, Vance, and Noem about Good and the circumstances surrounding her death would have stood as fact. Not that the existence of several other recordings revealing their lies matters to this administration. After all, the boss is someone who believes the only check on him should be, quote, my own morality, my own mind. Joining us now, Bishop William J. Barber II. He is president of Repairers of the Breach and founding director of the Center for Public Theology and Public Policy at Yale Divinity School. Bishop Barber, it is great to see you, sadly, under these circumstances, but we have a president who claims his own morality should be the only barrier to his power. What would it look like to actually have a president be a moral leader?
Well, let me start. This is heavy, Jonathan, because religious nationalists have helped feed this into Trump because they've taught him that he's some kind of Messiah figure, like Cyrus in the Bible, terrible exegesis, bad. And he really thinks his own morality is kind of his own God wannabe-ness. And so in his mind, whatever he does is wrong. It's a kind of sick psychosis, narcissistic. But a true moral leader would be a leader that says, I am constrained. I'm constrained by the Constitution to establish justice, not injustice. I'm constrained by the Constitution to care for to provide for the common defense of all people, not blame somebody for being shot by an ICE agent. I am constrained by the Constitution to care for the least of these because I'm supposed to promote the general welfare of all Americans, not wake up in the morning and in my own mind decide, I know how I use my power. Let's see how many people's health care I can take. Let's see how many people I can block from a living wage. Let's see how many people I can make hungry in a time when food prices are out of whack. And while I'm doing that, let's see how much hate I can spread. Let's see how much division I can spread. Let's see how much meanness I can spread. And while I'm doing that, let me see how many more billionaires I can make billionaires and maybe a trillionaire. If you really were following just the Constitution itself, equal protection under the law, it would be different. But that's not where his mind is. Now, if you couple that with, he's also listening to these people that have decided that empathy is the cause of the decline of Western society. It's quite sick because it's because of empathy that we have hospitals, and because of empathy that we have Social Security, and because of empathy that we have Medicaid, because of empathy that we have public schools. Is because people empathize with those who did not have and said this ought to be the work of government. So what he has said is very dangerous and a sign of a very sick kind of narcosis and Messiah type thinking.
Bishop Barber, let me get your reaction to something from the National Catholic Reporter, which wrote this about J.D. Vance's inflammatory comments about Renee Good's death. The vice president's comments justifying the death of Renee Good are a moral stain on the collective witness of our Catholic faith. Vance knows that lying and killing are sins. Vance knows. He doesn't care. Vance's twisted and wrong-headed view of Christianity has been repudiated by 2 popes. His Catholicism seems to be little more than a political prop, a tool only for his career ambitions and desire for power. Your response to that?
Yeah, Vance's faith is power. Any way he can get it. And his commitment to what we call technocratic feudalism and the kind of creating what they call apocalyptic politics, where you suggest things are so bad, and that means you got to give us any power we need to do whatever we want to do. Dr. King informs us here something. When he preached the funeral of the 4 girls that were blown up in Birmingham, he said the question is not just who killed them, but what killed them. And what has killed this mother in this city is the willingness to militarize our cities in an unchecked manner. What has killed her is a hunting spree for immigrants and turning on immigrants in a country of immigrants. What killed her is an attitude that force and violence is how the government governs. Fear is how the government governs. And that's the problem. And that's why we must have a movement of people who decide we must love forward together. We love abolishing poverty. We love living wages. We love health care. We love love and not hate. We love freedom and the rule of law, not out of control ICE agents. We must mobilize together and mobilize in ways like we had never had before.
Bishop William Barber, it is always great to see you. Thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
Thank you for having me.
Tonight's Last Word is next. I'll see you tomorrow morning. On the weekend, Minnesota State Attorney General Keith Ellison will join us on the latest in Minnesota. That's tomorrow starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, right here on MS Now.